The embodiment of emotions and the home for millions of fans around the world. It is the perfect environment for NFTs.
I hope you enjoyed that clip as well. NFTs, ladies and gentlemen, look at all those blank expressions. A little bit out of our comfort zone, for not all of us, but for some of us. Just to give you, well, I'm not going to try and explain it because that would be ridiculous, but to give you a little bit of background about NFTs, they have quickly been established as this new means of fan engagement. Ultimately, it's about making a bit more money, that's as far as I can tell. And we're seeing it more and more with more high-profile teams and footballers and players and athletes all wanting a slice of the action. And you heard it there, I mean, this year, it's generating more than $2 billion. That's double what it was last year, just to put that into context. So we're talking about something that's growing at an exponential rate. So in this session, we're just going to be explaining what exactly NFTs are and the legal issues sporting organisations should be aware of before they enter the industry. So our next guest leads the sports business group at Winston Strawn LLP, negotiating multi-million-pound global sponsorship agreements. So she advises on contractual and IP matters relating to NFTs, the metaverse, and other such tech trends. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Alex Kellan.
Everybody, good afternoon. It's great to be here back in person. Hope you're all enjoying everything so far. This session is going to be a bit different to the serious regulatory issues we've been talking about this morning. Hopefully, most of you were able to see some of that video, because actually that introductory video was a great explanation capturing what NFTs are. But if you're still unclear or you missed it, don't worry. My job in this session is to try and explain what are NFTs and what as lawyers do you need to know about them. In terms of myself, as Chloe said, I am a partner at Lewis Silkin, and I am a commercial IP sports marketing lawyer is probably the best way of explaining it. What I am not is, I am not, unfortunately, an NFT millionaire, and I am not a coder. So I'm looking at this from an IP commercial angle, really. But hopefully today I can share some of the knowledge that I have built up in beginning to advise more and more on NFTs. I've been told to assume minimal knowledge in the room, and to understand the legal implications, you do really need to understand what NFTs are. So the bulk of this is actually going to be trying to explain how they are used, what they really are, to put you in a position to be able to make sense of them. Taking a step back, if you put this into old money, we're looking really at collectibles in that traditional sense. I'm actually married to a Canadian ice hockey player, and 30 years ago as a kid he started collecting hockey cards, ice hockey cards. And I dug this out from under one of our beds. We've got 4 Tupperware boxes of ice hockey trading cards. And I dug some of them out, and some of them actually, big names in here, and I did a quick Google, and some of them are actually worth about $15 now, so who knows? Maybe in there is something that's really, really rare. Probably not, and I'll probably stay collecting dust until we die. and maybe that's what will happen to many NFTs. But in the same way as today in the news, we saw that the Maradona Hand of God shirt was sold at auction for £7 million. It may be that somebody picks up an NFT that in 30 years' time, when they just enter their digital wallet, it is worth a hefty sum. And indeed, lots of people are trading NFTs today and making a good amount of money. So obviously, NFTs are in sport synonymous with collectibles, and NBA Topshop was one of the early adopters. You saw that in the video. And one of the questions I'm asked about NFTs is, where does the value come from? NFTs use the power of blockchain technology to create scarcity in digital assets. We saw some of the video clips there of LeBron James, and this is actually the same example that I happened to pick out. You can see that there are different equivalents to a trading card, but they will be here video clips, and NFTs can come in all sorts of digital assets. So they might be an artwork, they might be an animated graphic, or they might be a video clip. On Topshop, they release different levels of number of editions, so limited editions. You have common ones, and there'll be many thousand common NFTs released with that particular video clip or whatever asset it might be, through to the legendary ones. And there will be very few of those, and as a result, the value is much higher. You can see here, I think it's over $5,000 for that particular one. And you know, this is now catching on across other sports. Coming back to ice hockey, the NHL have not done an official NFT site yet, but the clubs are starting to catch on. Here you can see the Calgary Flames issuing some very funky NFTs. And it's happening in the UK as well. So you can see here, Team GB, British Olympic Association, launched some NFT pins ahead of both the Tokyo and Beijing Olympics. And you know, they're selling them for £90 a pop. Not sure whether you buy that for a real pin, spend that rather. But it's unclear yet where the market for this is. It might be that actually over here, because we don't have that market in collectibles in the same way as they do in the States, there's not so much take-up from fans, but there are investors out there that are looking for NFTs which will hopefully become valuable over time. A good example of this sort of difference between investors versus fans and spotting what NFTs are really worthwhile is this case of the Liverpool NFT drop just a few weeks ago. So they released 24 one-of-one legendary NFTs. So these were absolutely unique, one for each member of the team plus Jurgen Klopp. And some of those did sell at auction for over £60,000. However, they also at the same time issued what they called their limited edition NFTs, which again were based on the players, and each one of those is unique, but it was based on a different combination of what they were wearing, what background it was, what they were holding, etc. And actually there was very limited take-up in there. There could have been 171,000 NFTs minted in total, and only less than 10,000 were actually taken up in that initial auction. So there wasn't an appetite from fans, even though Liverpool was selling this as 50% of the profits going to their charity, the LFC Foundation. So hopefully now you've got a little better idea as to how sports are using NFTs. So back to basics and sort of trying to break it down. NFT stands for non-fungible token. If something is fungible, hopefully you all know this, it's something that you can swap one thing directly and get the same value from something else. So cash in your pocket, Bitcoin. On the other hand, something is non-fungible if it is unique and you cannot exchange it for anything else in that sense. So the best example is the Mona Lisa. You know, there is one painting out there which is the original. Nobody can replicate that in the truest sense of it being the first. On the other hand, you know, it's out of copyright, so anybody can buy a print or just screen grab it from the internet, and they're not infringing anybody's rights. But nevertheless, the Mona Lisa itself holds that value. The token aspect of NFTs, this is a digital representation of value or contractual rights, which is cryptographically secured on a distributed ledger technology like blockchain. So I know I just said a lot of words there, but think of the token aspect as the certificate of authentication or the deed. It's like a deed to your house. You know, that is what proves that you own your house, but it isn't the house itself. Blockchain, I have not got time to go into blockchain today, you'll be glad to know. Hopefully you've all got a pretty good idea of it. If you don't, I'd say go and have a read. I grabbed this summary from IBM, which is actually quite useful, and there's lots of things you can read out there. The key takeaway for NFTs is that blockchain is an immutable ledger, which provides a record, and particularly on which you can store smart contracts. I'll come on to smart contracts in more detail in a moment. And the function of an NFT, as I said, it's this immutable deed of certification, authentication. It shows that you're the owner of a particular digital asset, but it isn't the digital asset itself. The smart contract element of an NFT it's basically just a bit of code that is programmed to say when something happens, normally a sale on the secondary market, something else will happen, and in this case, it's normally that the original creator of the NFT will be paid a royalty. So those are key aspects of NFTs, but it's really the immutable and non-fungible nature of the NFT that gives us its value. It is like having proof that you are the original owner. Some jargon busting. So, trotting through these. Minting is the process of publishing the digital asset or NFT to the blockchain. It's also the point at which you program your smart contracts, so you set what level of royalties you want on future sales. And those royalties will be paid into the person's digital wallet. Wallets, as I'm sure you know, in a sense we're talking about crypto wallets, so they can store cryptocurrencies, and some, but not all, crypto wallets can also store NFTs. There are loads of wallet providers in NFT world, a couple of key ones like Coinbase, Trust Wallet, and MetaMask. In your wallet, alongside your NFT, you might hold ETH or Ether. They are the cryptocurrency, and of course most NFTs are purchased with cryptocurrency. ETH is the cryptocurrency of the Ethereum blockchain, and it is most commonly used in the NFT world because Ethereum have actually released a smart contract, a bit of code, which works perfectly for the NFT scenario. It makes sure those royalties are paid out. There are other blockchains that are used and other currencies, but one thing to note is that once you have issued and minted an NFT to a blockchain, you can't swap it over to another blockchain. That blockchain is immutable. It is there. Gas, are the fees that you pay on any transaction when you mint and then on subsequent purchases and sales. And the gas represents the energy that is consumed when that transaction happens. So one of the big criticisms of crypto generally is that it takes a lot of energy to undertake these transactions. And the amount of gas will reflect that. So actually transactions on Ethereum are quite energy intensive, and you can pay as much as £20 to mint an NFT in Ethereum. And that's obviously why the prices, the benchmarks are quite high. On the other hand, people are now developing more eco-friendly blockchains, and Dapper Labs, who actually developed the NBA Top Shot site, that runs on Flow, a blockchain they created, and there I believe the fees are much lower because it is less energy intensive. Marketplaces, those are the locations where people can mint and trade their NFTs. A couple of the key ones are OpenSea, you may have heard of that, and Rarible is another very common one. And even you and I could go on there and upload a photo that we took of something and create an NFT and see whether it's sold, if you're willing to pay the gas fees, obviously. And finally, I want to talk about utility. So utility in an NFT are the real-world benefits of that come with an NFT. So yes, you might just be happy with effectively your link to your digital asset and being able to parade that around and show off that you own it. And of course, you might be interested in just the value of that going up in the future. But a lot of people want something else with their NFTs. And the best way of explaining this is through an example, and I suspect a lot of you will already have heard of Four Lake Yacht Club because it is one of the most famous NFTs, obviously not in a sports context, But if you haven't heard of them, Bored Ape Yacht Club began as an issue of 10,000 unique apes. Each one of the apes was generated randomly through an algorithm. We call this generative art. And each ape had something different, so what they were wearing, whether their mouth's open, how big their eyes are, etc. And some of them have become more valuable, frankly, just because they look better than others. These NFTs are now worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. And one of the reasons is actually they gain this credibility, but also it comes with real world benefits. They run events for their owners. They have a Discord channel, which is like a social media platform that a lot of NFT chat is on, and that's unique. So there are lots of famous people that own Bored Apes, and you can go on the Discord channel and chat with Justin Bieber or whoever is the latest owner. And they also allow you access to exclusive drops of future NFTs. So Bored Ape issued some dog NFTs, so your Bored Ape could have a dog. It's a new world, it really is. But this utility is something that is really becoming very common with NFTs now, and people are attaching all sorts of real world benefits to NFTs. At its most basic level, even those Team GB pins I showed you at the beginning, if you were the first purchaser of one of those directly from the British Olympic Association, you got a free t-shirt with it. Okay, moving on, there are a few other things that it'd be good to be aware of to put NFTs in its full context. So there's been lots of talk about how NFTs manifest themselves in the metaverse, in these virtual worlds that are now popping up everywhere. One idea is that an NFT could be used as your avatar in those virtual worlds. Here we have an example of Nike issuing some trainers. They have done a couple of things. They've created Nike Land, which is their virtual world, their metaverse, and you can be seen wearing your Nike NFT trainers, but each of them will be completely unique in that world. You can also do a Snapchat filter, so you can be seen to wear your crypto pics, as they're called. But you can see this is where it's going. At the moment, I think it's pretty much impossible to jump from an NFT being in one metaverse to another. There are lots of people working on that, and in the future you can see how seamlessly you can move from one metaverse to another, and you will be the same character which will represent your NFT in each of those worlds, and your unique outfits that you'll be wearing will all be NFT based. Fan tokens, you've probably all seen these in the news. Again, this is a type of crypto asset. It's a token that allows, it's often issued by football clubs and other clubs in sports, and it allows the fans to vote on certain activities of the club. They can be traded, and they are going up and down in value. Yeah, I'll come on to some of the regulatory issues around fan tokens in a moment. And then finally, decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs or DAOs. So this is a little more difficult to explain. They're like the Web 3.0 version of a company, but it's not a company, it's not attached to any government organization, any company house equivalent. It is simply that as a member or like a shareholder equivalent, you own a token that gives you rights to determine how the organisation is run. In the sporting world, this is a recent example that's in the process of being set up, Motor DAO, I think is how you say it. It's promising that you'll have, as a holder of one of their tokens, governance rights on team events, acquisitions and more. In particular, you get to nominate and vote on who they will give money to support young drivers. So, this is real world stuff that is transiting now. You also get access to VIP events. Because I've got a bit of an ice hockey theme here, just rounding this all up, and before I get on to the legal issues, I did a bit quick Google and came up with Lip Sweater, which is a startup which is creating a ice hockey NFT, which is a generative art wolf, so you get one of a unique wolf, And as part of that as well, it is a bit like a DAO, so you get membership voting rights to an organisation which is invested in a professional minor ice hockey league team. So you actually become a part owner of that team effectively, and they have ambitions to use this to fund that team to get it to the NHL basically. So again, real world examples in sports. So I've got a few minutes left now to go into the legal issues. First off, IP. If you want to issue an NFT as a sports organisation or a club or an athlete, you want to make sure that the digital assets that you are going to be issuing as NFTs are owned by you, or that you have the relevant licenses for. So for example, if you're a club or an NGB, have you got the rights from all the athletes contractually to be able to use their image in this sense? And this will come down to what it says in your contract. Likewise, if you're an athlete, have you got the right to be able to issue an NFT, which is the clip of you scoring the famous goal when you were playing for England? Or can you issue an NFT where you are wearing the jersey of the team that you played for your career? You can see here this particular NFT website is athlete focused, called Autograph, and it's really evident when you look around their website that none of the athletes are wearing any team gear. They are all just name, image, likeness, and nothing more. And they've obviously done this to avoid any licensing issues. You've got to obviously remember, do you own the underlying photograph or what have you too? That's important. Also from an IP point of view, as a consumer of an NFT, you might think that by buying an NFT you get the rights to the underlying IP, but that's not normally the case. The IP in the digital artwork will normally remain with the artist or the club that's issuing that NFT, and all you get as a purchaser of the NFT is a license to use and display, normally in a non-commercial context, that particular digital asset. The other point to point out, it's not the rule. So an interesting exception to this is actually the Bored Apes. If you purchase a Bored Ape, you are actually assigned the IP in your Bored Ape. And I read a few weeks ago that apparently there were a few owners of Bored Apes that are putting together and using their apes in a film. So they have the right to do that, at least until they sell them to somebody else, and the rights would be assigned with them. Another important legal aspect is the T's and C's when you are selling and trading the NFTs. So there will, in your T's and C's, need to be some pretty hefty restrictions, and you'll need to be thinking about consumer law issues here as well. You can see this is just a screen grab of artifacts. You can see these are the guys who work with Nike on the previous example I gave. And there are some really significant restrictions in here, including about the IP rights and the restrictions on selling off authorized platforms. So this is something that needs to be paid particular attention to. And then regulatory issues. I don't know how well you can see this, but effectively the top line is the value of one particular Bored Ape over time, and actually Bored Apes are one of the most valuable and stable NFTs you can purchase, albeit they are very expensive, but you can see that there's some fluctuation. But based on the fact that these are purchased with Ether, and you can see at the bottom the massive fluctuation in the value of Ether against, I think that's against the pound. And one Ether is worth about £2,000 at the moment, so you have to bear this in mind. Obviously, the value of that Bored Ape is going up and down, and they are being traded like shares. So the Advertising Standards Authority have been really hot on this recently. They are clamping down on irresponsible crypto advertising generally. And you can see here they've issued quite heavy guidance. Just a couple of things that they're now requiring is that You have to make it clear, like you would with any other investment, that the value can go up and down. They've identified tax issues, capital gains issues, which might kick in. And they say that your adverts must not take advantage of the inexperience or credulity of consumers. So you have to think you're not talking to a sophisticated market here, and make sure it doesn't suggest that you should take this lightly and it's easy to buy and trade NFTs. For nothing least, you've got to set up a crypto wallet. You've normally got to purchase some crypto to do this. So, moving swiftly on, some other legal issues to think about. Big one is the financial services regulatory issues. This isn't my area. My colleague Wendy Saunders, I was hoping she'd be able to come along in case I get any nasty questions, but she's actually on a rowing holiday in the Canaries, I think. So, no nasty questions in this front, please. But in all seriousness, if you are issuing NFTs, you will need to take some financial services regulatory advice, particularly if you're a platform. The anti-money laundering requirements are likely to apply, and this whole area is being considered by the FCA at the moment, so the rules will be changing rapidly, I think. In terms of commercial agreements, so most sports organisations will team up with somebody, effectively like a merchandise licensee. They will grant somebody the rights to issue NFTs on their behalf, and the terms of that agreement are really important. So how do the IP rights work? If that NFT licensee is going to be actually creating the digital artwork that they're issuing, then you probably want an assignment back of those rights so that they remain with you. How royalties work and the smart contract terms will need to be nailed out. Obviously, in a normal merchandise scenario, the licensee gets to retain the price they sold it at, and as the club, the licensor, you get a royalty back. That only happens on the initial sale. But with NFTs, there's that perpetual royalty going on, and you've got to think about how's that going to work. How are those royalties going to be paid? Are they going to be paid to you or to the licensee? And can they be paid to both? At the moment, the basic Ethereum smart contracts for NFTs only allow for payment into one wallet. So how does that work? And then you've got to imagine these royalties could go on perpetually, in theory. What happens when the agreement with the licensee terminates with those royalties? What happens? 200 years down, it's mind-boggling, and people haven't really thought this through yet, and there aren't any cases, etc., that give us any light as to how this will be dealt with. And then finally, I'm at 0 on my clock, trademark protection. If you are going to issue NFTs, you'll want to have a look at what classes of goods and services you've got your trademarks protected in. Any sort of crypto activity, NFTs, is likely to need a couple of additional classes and specification there. And finally, some practical issues. This is a brand new area. There are hacks going on. People are losing crypto assets, NFTs, from their wallets. IP enforcement in this area is hard. I mean, in theory, once an NFT has been minted, it is immutable. So if that has infringed somebody's IP rights, how does that work? We've talked about the environmental concerns, and frankly, it's just all new. Everybody's learning as they go, so it's a fun area to be working in, but it has its challenges. So that's it from me. Question time.
Take a state round of applause, please. That's nice. Before I start, oh my goodness, I could ask 1,000 questions. I'm going to start with one from the audience, though. Alice and Rembrandt, thank you for this. It's a really interesting question, if a bit complicated. If a rights holding governing body creates an NFT of a sporting moment, can the players in the clip get a cut of the sale? And furthermore, if we're talking about a team sport like cricket, that country's player association may have done a deal with the governing body to ensure their players benefit from the sale, but what if the key protagonist is a player in the opposition? Do they have any rights?
It all comes down to the contracts and the network of contracts. So in a competition where you've got a clip in two organisations playing, then chances are that the International Federation or the league that has organised that will have dealt with this issue. They will have obtained some rights from all of the players, all the protagonists, including, frankly, the fans. You know, if they're in the audience, they'll have, on their ticket terms and conditions, had something about right to use your image for commercial purposes. Yeah, it comes down to what is agreed in the contract, and likewise in terms of how they'll be remunerated as a result. I think the challenge here is a lot of these contracts, particularly in clubs where you've got people moving around very regularly, they often only allow the exploitation of the rights for the period that they're under employment and perhaps a little while afterwards with a run-off period. And because of this perpetuality of NFTs, people aren't necessarily thinking in that context yet. So it is worth going back to your athlete agreements and thinking, does this actually work? Firstly, are they covered under the definition of merchandise, or however you phrase what you can do with the athlete's image? And secondly, yeah, how much are they going to get paid, when are they going to get paid, and how long do you owe them money for, etc. But from a technical point of view, in terms of coding a smart contract to be able to pay all of these people at once on every transaction, I understand that in theory that is possible. I know in music they're looking at how potentially they can use this technology to automatically send royalties to all the artists that might be involved in a particular track. But as I said, the basic NFT code that is used by the majority of people, my understanding, it just goes to one wallet. I do think there's some technology which allows to put it into a wallet, and then there's an app that splits it. That's where I'm at on that.
I think what I had not realised, you know, is that this that it exists at the fact of clubs and they're across these contracts are already in place, so you can't really establish an NFT in that instance without the contract ever being in place. Are those regulations in place to make sure that happens? I just feel like there's just a million lawsuits just waiting to happen here.
I mean, the concept isn't new. You know, if a club wants to issue a calendar which has all of its players in there, you can do that, and they'll have the rights to do that under the playing contract. And yes, there's a standard Premier League playing contract that will include that sort of activity. But there are limits within that, and you will need to make sure. So often, a Premier League contract will allow you to use the player's image in a club context effectively. So is the image that's being used falling within that?
I mean, sorry, we'll get to the floor in a minute. I just talk to you all day about this, but you mentioned scammers, and that was one thing I wanted to ask about. You know, that it seems so open to that. It just seems, you know, you talked about the fact that we're kind of learning on the job, but we're learning on the job about something that's worth billions of pounds, which is, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, from a rights holder's point of view, just knowing who you are working with, I think, is really important, and having confidence there. From a consumer point of view, yeah, there are lots of people issuing NFTs out there who don't own the underlying IP. There's recently been a case of Birkin bags, and a lawsuit was brought, and my understanding is that actually the platform that had issued them did honour that, and they've actually, you know, effectively destroyed those NFTs to the extent you can because of the immutable nature of the ledger.
Have we any questions from the floor? I imagine that we do. No one is prepared to put their hand up because they're terrified. You're all going to have to, I'll tell you what, there's money to be made here. I'm telling you, it just seems to be, as I mentioned, just so malleable at the minute. Even when I was having just a quick look at your board, what do you call it? Board apes. Board apes, there we go. I really need to get across this. Board apes, I mean, it's just worth incredible amounts of money, but then you read one headline, oh, you know, if you've invested in this, you're about to make millions, and then the next headline is, if you've invested in this, you've lost everything from a day later. I mean, it just seems from a legal point of view, if you know, the people who want to get involved with this side of things, it seems mad, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of clubs are taking quite a cautious approach, and yeah, maybe waiting for the market to mature a little bit. But at the same time, you know, all sports need money, and it is a way of, and it's relatively cheap to do if you've got the rights. You know, it's your gas fees and some fees that you're, you know, on a royalty basis with a licensee. You're kind of not going to lose too much
Is it something that young athletes are getting advice on now? If they're joining up to a club, are they aware of this? Do they know that they have to be able to buy and sell their image? And is this part of it as an NFT?
I think most of the governing bodies, etc., will have some sort of education process for when an athlete signs up to their athlete agreement to take them through it, but I don't know how thoroughly that is done, or whether frankly some young athletes are really interested or get some of this. It is, as we've just seen, quite complicated, but there's definitely a role for better advice to athletes.
And do you feel it's being regulated at the minute?
NFTs generally?
Yeah, within the sports industry, because it's something that they just don't. As I say, I feel like some clubs and some establishments are really across it, and others are completely clueless. It's a very strange position to be in at the minute.
Yeah, well, hopefully I've helped educate people a little bit. They can take that back and be able to make a more informed decision as to whether to dive into this area or not. But it's, I think it's ad hoc, as you say. Some people are really across it and others just not at all.
Well, I think it's time we all got across it. It is a multi-billion-pound industry, as we've discussed. Alex Callum, it has been a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much. Once again, Alex Callum, ladies and gentlemen.